Alright, you guys, Zeofar back here, and this is going to be my review for episode 1 of season 9 of The Walking Dead. And pretty much before I get in this review, I just want to say really quickly that we're going to be doing these a bit more differently this season. Pretty much what I mean is we're going to be condensing these reviews down into 10 minutes or less. Every once in a while we might go over, like with this video for example. I'm guessing this one might go over a little bit, but for the most part we're going to try to keep them condensed down, and we're going to cover some of the other stuff that happened in the episodes, on the more specific stuff, more in depth in separate videos along the side. So yeah, if you really like The Walking Dead and you want a lot of Walking Dead content and stuff, and you're looking for a place to just talk about The Walking Dead, this channel is going to have a lot of that for you. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. But anyway, getting into this episode, and obviously spoiler warning if you haven't seen the episode yet, but in this episode we follow Rick and the group as they head into Washington DC on a run to gather some old school technology to help them advance into the future. And of course, you know, the run goes wrong. We see a kid from the hilltop die, a younger guy, and his parents aren't happy about it. And Slimeball, good old Slimeball Gregory, comes along, gets both of them drunk and convinces the father to help him try and assassinate Maggie. And Maggie actually almost, there's actually 2 attempts from what I can tell on Maggie's life this episode, and both of them fail and ultimately cost Gregory his life by the end, because by that point Maggie had been pushed to the point, to her breaking point, forcing her to choose to be the kind of leader she was going to be, or that she wanted to be. And with this being said, this was a really good episode, really nice blended episode that showed off a lot of characters, their story, what had happened between here and the end of season 8. Lots of really great stuff in this episode, and we're going to get into all of it here. So one of the first things I want to talk about in this episode was the Easter eggs from the comics, because there were quite a few in this episode. I might have missed a couple, but I want to talk about the Easter eggs and the remixes that we saw from the comic book. So first off, the kid that dies in this episode is named Ken. The other one with long hair that's with them on this run is named Marco. So if you don't recognize those 2 names from the comics, they're Ken and Marco. Ken and Marco in the comics are actually the first 2 characters to run into the next big villains in The Walking Dead, which we know we're going to see later this season because of the trailer. So yeah, it's interesting to see that they're not going to be a part of that, or at least one of them isn't. So I'm interested to see how they remix that later down the line too. We know Eugene and Rosita are going to be heavily involved there, but I want to see what if Marco gets any more screen time and what they decide to do with him going forward, or if he's just going to be a background character. But anyway, another interesting thing is Ken's father in this version of the story is actually Earl from the Hilltop. If you don't know who Earl is from the Hilltop, well, he is a new character, but he's the blacksmith at the Hilltop, which means he can craft pretty much anything, or just about anything, weapons. He can obviously make stuff that they would need it to remake a new carrots and stuff, like all the stuff they were getting from the Hilltop, to fix that broken plow that fell, and you know, Ken died in that whole situation. So it's interesting to see that they're going with this dynamic. Now the Hilltop's blacksmith has done this horrible thing, so you're kind of just left to ask, how is Maggie going to handle this? And we get to see a little bit of that in the preview for next week's episode, but it's going to be interesting to see how she handles that situation, because obviously this just isn't any guy that committed this crime against you. This is a guy that could be pretty important going forward, not only for keeping your community well equipped, but every community well equipped. You know, he has a very useful skill, extremely useful. So can't wait to see more of that going forward. Really interested in that. But anyway, one big thing that is present throughout this entire episode is the shift from the focus on just surviving to living. These characters are no longer fighting every second to survive in this world. They're living in this world, and you see that they're still struggling a little bit with that, but they're living. You know, they're happy. They have crops. They all have homes. They're not constantly looking over their shoulder anymore. For the most part, they're as about close to a normal life as they're going to get anytime soon in the zombie apocalypse. So I thought that was really interesting. They did a really good job with showing that off in this episode. Another thing that you might notice is a lot more character focused moments. Like, there were a lot of character connections in this episode, which worked out really well. Just really good dialogue and all that kind of stuff. People have been saying Angela Kang, the new show runner, is a god for this episode, and I'm not gonna lie, like, this was pretty good, so they might not be too far off there. But yeah, overall, lots of great character moments in this episode, like the conversation between Rick and Michonne while they're in bed, Rick and Daryl, that whole little conversation where more than we've seen Daryl say in seasons, man. Like, Daryl's back to like the way he was in the first couple of seasons. He's talking a lot more, expressing himself a lot more. He's a lot more straightforward, and that's really likable. So can't wait to see more of that. Carol and Ezekiel were also a new relationship that we got to see a lot more in this episode, and I really like their dynamic that they got going on. However, I'm a little bit worried for them, because as we know in this show, nobody stays that happy forever. So yeah, a little bit worried there, but we'll talk about that in a different video. But anyway, lots of great character moments in this episode, this, that, and the third. But the main focus of this episode, the main point of this entire episode, in my opinion, the biggest takeaway from it is Maggie. Lauren Cohan did a great job with the acting in this episode, by the way, as usual. But Maggie's character development in this episode, this definitely felt like a character development episode for Maggie going forward. So pretty much the way I saw it is, after this happens, after Maggie is forced to deal with this choice, or with this situation where her helping the saviors, her helping them out, her going out of her way to supply them, to keep them fed while they're getting back on their feet, to, kind of hold them up, has kind of caused all these problems for her at home. And now she has to figure out how she's going to deal with it. And I really enjoyed this, because this kind of forced Maggie to choose what kind of leader she wants to be. And as we saw in the episode, she chose not to be the same kind of leader Rick was. And I do believe this is the direct continuation of what happened at the end of last season, where Maggie, Daryl, and Jesus were having that really ominous seeming conversation about showing Rick and Michonne that they were wrong, this, that, and the third. I think this is what they were talking about. A lot of people took that as, oh man, she might betray Rick. No, I don't think that's going to happen. I think they just overplayed that scene for the simple fact just to give you something to think about for next season or whatever, just to get you hyped for the next season. But yeah, I think this is what's going to be. Maggie is going to choose to be a much more different leader than Rick is. She's going to choose to be a vastly different leader than Rick. She's not as merciful. she's a little bit more harsh in the way she speaks and stuff and everything. And some people are saying that it was rubbing them wrong, this, that, and the third, with the way Maggie was talking to Rick, and to see her talking to him as leader to leader instead of kind of like mentor to student in a way, and pretty much I really like this. I really enjoyed this because this, if you read the comics, you know that this is comic book Maggie. Maggie in the comic book is a much more kind of, she seems like a much more rough around the edges kind of leader than Rick. She's a lot more cold and cutthroat than Rick is in the comics. Not to an extreme, but she's just a lot more harsh in the way she leads, and I really like that they're bringing that over to the show because we already have a Rick, or we've already had a Rick, and I'm interested to see how she leads going forward. As we know, she's going to be leaving this season too, but they're saying she's going to come back, so who knows how that's going to work out. I certainly don't yet, but hopefully she does come back and stay for at least a couple more seasons, because man, this episode got me excited for her character arc. I just hope they don't do something corny with taking her out of the show later this season, because we know it's going to happen and she may or may not come back. We don't know yet, but I hope she does. But yeah, that's all the real big stuff for this episode. The only other thing to talk about really is the conflict with whether or not the Saviors want redemption. And I'm not really going to go into that because it seems like that's going to be a much bigger theme in the next episode. So with that being said, we'll just save that whole conversation for next week and stuff. But yeah, like I said, guys, this video was a little bit longer than some of the other reviews might tend to be. But overall, I feel like I got all my points across really well and stuff. So I'm really happy with the way this turned out, actually. Overall, really great episode. Out of 5 stars, I give this a 4-star review. It's not like this extremely insane masterpiece, but it's also pretty good. It's pretty up there on the list of Walking Dead episodes. Definitely some of the best writing, dialogue, structure, just best everything that we've had for the past couple of seasons. This episode just feels like it's been crafted by people who know what they're doing, and there's no denying it. Some people felt it was boring. I liked it all the way through. Only thing that I probably could have done with a little bit less of was the funeral scene, but other than that, it was good. So with that being said, tell me what you guys thought of the episode. Leave your comments and stuff down below telling me. Don't forget to hit that like button and that subscribe button, because we are going to be going more in depth on this episode with some of the stuff I talked about in this video. So with that being said, thanks for watching, you guys. Hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you on the next one. ZFR out, guys.